What if the love you once thought was lost could be reignited through the very conflict that threatened to tear you apart? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? The air in their living room crackled with tension as Emily's voice cut through the silence, firm yet trembling, as she declared their decision to divorce. Jason stood there, his hands buried deep in his pockets, the shock clear on his face as if the weight of their crumbling marriage had finally settled on his shoulders. The memories of laughter and shared dreams crowded the walls of their once happy home, but now it was merely a battleground of hurt feelings and unmet expectations. In that moment of raw vulnerability, they hit a wall of fierce impasse over the one tangible thing they still shared, their home. Emily's heart raced, a swirl of anger and desolation battling within her. No way was she going to let Jason have the house without a fight. Without even pausing to think, they impulsively crafted an unusual challenge. For the next 6 months, they would compete to prove who could adapt better to single life. The winner would keep the house. As Jason's eyebrows raised in disbelief, a fleeting moment of hope glimmered in Emily's eyes. This contest could be the spark to reignite their lives. With ground rules established, no interference in each other's lives, no sabotaging, and full independence, Emily threw herself into her work as an architect with renewed vigor. The sound of her pencil sketching blueprints echoed through the day, filling the corners of their shared home with purpose. She began entertaining the idea of dating, an exhilarating prospect that both excited and terrified her. Meanwhile, Jason, in his laid-back fashion, indulged in the charms of bachelorhood. He filled his evenings with casual gatherings, nostalgia washed over him as friends hailed his easygoing nature, believing he would finally embrace the freedom he had craved for so long. But beneath their confident facades, an undercurrent of tension flowed. It wasn't just the division of chores that became a battleground. It was the little things, the way Emily would instinctively clean up Jason's forgotten belongings or how Jason would catch himself brewing her favorite tea. The shared glances that lingered a heartbeat too long were enough to hint that the flame of their past had not entirely extinguished. They crashed into each other in the kitchen over a missed cup, a minor disagreement transforming into a reminder of the life they had built together, however flawed it was. As weeks unfolded, Emily's determination grew, pushing her to embrace the single life with open arms while Jason painted a facade of carefree living. Emily made plans to meet potential new interests and immersed herself in her projects with exaggerated enthusiasm, but even as she laughed at her new dates, a hidden piece of her ached with the weight of their memories. Meanwhile, Jason plowed ahead, writing new stories in the solitude of bar stools, but every laugh with friends was a reminder of what he was losing. Their paths crossed and diverged like the intertwining roots of the same tree, fighting to thrive on both ends yet feeling the same heaviness in their roots. The air thickened with unspoken words, secrets wrapped in the mundane routine of sharing a home. As laughter echoed in the halls, walls strategically erected between them served as constant reminders that while the challenge had galvanized their lives into chaotic motion, it had also exposed their vulnerabilities. An invisible string connected them, pulling taut in moments of silence, as Emily caught sight of Jason stealing glances at her as she manipulated her phone with casual glee, and she couldn't help but wonder if he was secretly hoping she would fail in this competition for happiness. Each interaction felt like a live wire, crackling with the uncertainty of what lay ahead, a bold reminder that even in their discontent, old habits die hard, and letting go was a dance neither was quite ready to take part in. As the weeks went by, the rivalry between Emily and Jason intensified, each determined to prove that they were better off without the other. Emily, with her ambitious spirit ignited by the competition, began to shift her focus from the solitude of their home to the vibrant nightlife of the city. She attended art openings, wine tastings, and networking events, donning chic outfits that radiated confidence. With every event, she felt the refreshing buzz of freedom, relishing in the exhilaration of mingling among fellow professionals but secretly yearning for the comfort of Jason's familiar presence. Yet, amidst this newfound social whirlwind, she couldn't escape the small habits that betrayed her lingering affection. One morning, she found herself brewing Jason's favorite coffee, the rich aroma wafting through the house, stirring memories of quiet mornings shared wrapped in one another's arms. She thought nothing of it and shrugged it off, convincing herself that it was merely a routine she had yet to shake. Meanwhile, Jason was navigating his new lifestyle with a calculated nonchalance. He organized casual gatherings with his friends, pulling laughter and stories from the depths of his relaxed creativity. Their evenings were filled with clinking glasses and casual banter, yet there was a persistent hollowness in his laughter. One Friday night, as his friends gathered around the living room, he found himself glancing towards the shared kitchen, imagining Emily bustling about, her meticulously organized space reflecting her meticulous nature. Unbidden, he made his way to her room, drawn by an uncharacteristic impulse to fix the broken drawer of her desk that had become an annoyance over time. As he tightened the screws, he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him, recalling how her exasperated sighs often filled the air when things didn't go according to her detailed plans. He dismissed these sentiments as mere acts of kindness, but he felt the bond that still tethered them beginning to stretch and pull at his conscience. Their friends, Jessica and Ryan, were perceptive enough to see the cracks in the personas they had crafted for themselves. Jessica eyed Emily with a knowing look, shaking her head in exasperation over the way her best friend spoke about the freedom she was embracing. "You sound more like you're trying to convince yourself than anyone else," she remarked, nudging Emily playfully as they sipped wine at a gallery opening, the vibrant artwork blurring in the background of Emily's mind. She dismissed her friend's comment with a wave of her hand, but beneath her steadfast facade, the seed of doubt began to germinate. Meanwhile, Ryan leaned over to Jason during a poker night, raising an eyebrow as he noted Jason's distracted demeanor whenever the conversation shifted to Emily. "You know, pretending you're over her might just be the thing that's keeping you from completely moving on," he said, sensing the tension that danced beneath Jason's lighthearted exterior. Just as their competition took a sharper turn, the social dynamics introduced new complexities. Mark, Emily's charming colleague, began to show interest in her, offering genuine compliments that slid warm and thought-provoking into the cracks of her heart, leaving her both flattered and confused. She found herself laughing at his jokes and tracing the lines of his confident presence, enjoying the flirtation that hinted at future possibilities. The thrill of attention was intoxicating, though a flicker of guilt sparked within her whenever she caught a glimpse of Jason's face, wistful yet masked behind an effortless smile. On Jason's side, Rachel had never been one to shy away from her feelings for him, and now she took every opportunity to flirt, her laughter echoing in the spaces where Emily's voice had once held sway. She leaned in just a little too close whenever she offered feedback on his writing, her touches lingering on his arm, and while he initially appreciated the attention, it stung in a way he didn't quite understand. As the competition progressed, their attempts to one-up each other led to moments of unintentional sharing and reminiscence, where they would stumble into old habits that still simmered beneath the surface. While Jason hosted friends, Emily found herself absent-mindedly organizing their conversation, skillfully maintaining equilibrium without meaning to. A playful jab here, a shared laugh there, both of them dismissing these moments as mere coincidences, clinging tightly to the illusion that they were indeed happier apart. Yet the underlying pulls of affection didn't fit neatly into either's new narrative. While they solidified their individual lives, their intertwining paths led to a surreal dance filled with both rivalry and familiarity, leaving a sense of something unresolved hanging in the air, waiting for acknowledgement. As the challenge between Emily and Jason intensified, the once comforting walls of their shared home began to buzz with unspoken resentment and competitive energy. Emily, with her meticulous plans and focus, threw herself deeper into work, eyeing her projects like a hawk ready to swoop down on a feeble prey. She accepted more responsibility at the firm, her instincts to prove herself sharpening her resolve. Each blueprint she unfurled in her office felt like a battle cry against any lingering doubts about her capabilities. Meanwhile, Jason, with the unburdened air of someone embracing newfound freedom, committed to taking on more freelance projects, determined to showcase his maturity and responsibility while aiming to please his brother's expectations. His evenings were spent shuffling between bustling cafes filled with the scent of roasted coffee and art-filled bookshops, where he sought solace in thoughts and sketches of whimsical worlds his characters would inhabit. However, the truth remained, both were deeply alone in their respective worlds, clutching their emotional armor as tightly as possible. Their rivalry soon reached new heights when they began to flaunt their attempts to adapt to single life. Emily made last-minute plans to dine with Mark, the charming junior architect whose attention felt refreshing, as if he were casting light onto her guarded heart. She could hear her pulse quicken as she slid into a dress that she hadn't worn in ages, its fabric hugging her in all the right places while excitement coiled in her stomach. She sent Jason a casual text to say she was out for dinner, knowing it would draw his attention. Jason, never one to back down, took the bait and hosted an impromptu gathering at his place, filling his home with laughter and the flicker of a carefree evening with his friends. Yet, underneath this facade of casualness, anxiety stirred in him. Would anyone notice how he instinctively looked to see if Emily would walk in and ruin his moment? However, life has a way of appending careful plans, and just as Emily and Jason leaned into their separate narratives, Emily fell ill with a bout of flu. The sunlit mornings grew dimmer as she succumbed to the aching chill of illness, her hopes of showing Jason how well she had adjusted crushed under a blanket of feverish dread. Strangled by the supernatural chill that infiltrated her bones, it wasn't long before she found herself huddled in bed, lost between dreams and reality. Jason, despite his efforts to appear unaffected, felt a jolt of concern surge through him, igniting an instinct buried deep within him. He instinctively fetched her favorite ginger tea, its warmth wrapping around him, and tiptoed into their shared abode, an uneasy truce forming within him. He saw her peacefully resting, the crinkled sheets and unkempt hair tugging at his affection, and reminded himself that despite everything, this was still his Emily. In an unprecedented twist, moments of tenderness emerged. He prepared a simple breakfast, the spicy scent of scrambled eggs filling the air and mingling with the soothing aroma of the tea. As the sun crested the horizon, spilling daylight into the corners of their home, he tried to inject humor into the stark silence that hung between them, recalling the silly inside jokes they used to share. They spoke casually as if rehearsing lines from a script written long ago. A faint smile broke across Emily's face, the warmth brimming around them inviting forgotten laughter back into their realm. For a moment, old rhythms of their connection returned, where laughter would weave through the halls, brushing aside their entrenched discontent. Yet, when Emily blinked awake to see him casually cooking breakfast as if they were simply slipping into their daily routine, shadows swiftly returned. She sat up, her mind racing to grasp the reality of their situation, a bitter reminder surfacing like the sun pushing through stormy clouds. The walls of her heart, once softened by the comfortable banter and warmth, dissolved back into the cold, hard walls of the contest. With a pointed reminder, she felt a surge of hurt and said that despite this, they were still in the middle of a divorce, and this breakfast only brought back oscillating feelings of nostalgia tangled in confusion. The moment hung delicately between them as if daring for either to step forward into the light or retreat aflame with unresolved tensions. A silence fell, charged and heavy, taking both Emily and Jason back into the throes of their competition, insidiously reminding them of the hurdles yet to be crossed. As the weeks rolled into months, the competition between Emily and Jason settled into a challenging routine defined by unspoken tension and emotional complexity. Jason found himself increasingly frustrated by Emily's emotional walls, which seemed to grow thicker with each passing day, making it harder for him to reach her despite the shared history that lingered in the corners of their home. In his search for connection and understanding, he began spending more time with Rachel, his longtime illustrator, who effortlessly grasped the whirlwind of insecurities that jumbled his creative spirit. Rachel's laughter was bright and warm, her eyes sparkled with admiration, and she seemed to draw Jason out of his solitude, offering him a glimpse of the emotional validation that he yearned for. He enjoyed their time together, and during one particularly animated conversation in a quaint cafe, Rachel leaned closer, her voice soft yet teasing as she said that he was too talented to be tied down by worries, suggesting that there was freedom in creativity when one let go of the past. Meanwhile, in her own way, Emily was also encouraged to explore the possibility of new beginnings, nudged forward by her best friend Jessica, who had watched their marriage shatter from the sidelines with a mixture of concern and determination. As Jessica confidently walked her through the myriad of dating apps, Emily felt a strange cocktail of excitement and fear bubbling up within her at the thought of inviting someone new into her life. When Mark, the charming junior architect with a reliable sense of humor, suggested they attend an upcoming company event together, a flutter awakened in her chest, one she hadn't felt in years. Emily found herself dressing with care that evening, selecting an outfit that showcased her well-curated style while also reflecting the vibrant, independent woman she was trying to embody. As they mingled with their colleagues, she could see Mark's eyes light up at her words, and she reveled in the attention. He leaned in closer, complimenting her work on the recent urban design project, his voice smooth and inviting as he said that there was no one else quite like her, and it made her feel special. However, amid the laughter and music of the event, Jason arrived unexpectedly. Spotting Emily across the room, he felt an undeniable pang of jealousy twist in his stomach. He watched her with Mark, their conversation animated and lively, and even from afar, he could see how her laughter seemed to flirt with the night air. Jason's brow furrowed as he crossed his arms, his heart racing with a mix of indignation and reluctance. He noted with fierce intensity how Mark's hand brushed against Emily's shoulder, a small gesture that ignited a fire within him. He told himself that he should feel happy seeing Emily enjoy herself, that it was part of the deal they made, but the tightening in his chest betrayed his thoughts. Instead of feeling like a liberated man enjoying the freedom of being single, he felt like a man on the verge of losing something precious. With newfound determination, Jason engaged in conversation with Rachel who, sensing his elevated mood, laughed at his attempts to mimic a character from one of their shared projects. He chuckled along, but his mind drifted back to Emily, and the sight of her in her element functioned like an emotional slap across his face. Later that night, after returning to their shared home, Emily glanced through the doorway to the kitchen and saw Jason laughing freely with Rachel on a video call, his smile a genuine radiance that warmed the space around them. An unfamiliar pang of regret washed over her, settling deep in her heart as she realized just how much she missed their laughter together, the comfortable silence they once shared, and the small things that used to bring them joy. It felt disheartening to think that laughter now belonged to someone else. Despite knowing they were supposed to be moving on, the emotional undercurrent they both had been trying to ignore grew stronger, whispering doubts that echoed in their minds. Emily sighed, trying to push away the feeling, but found herself grappling with the unsettling thought that perhaps they were not as content as they led themselves to believe. Both told themselves that they should be happy for one another's new beginnings, confident in their decisions to embrace life apart, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the fragile tension was veering into something far more complicated than they had intended. An unspoken understanding loomed in the air, one that suggested moving on was not as easy as it had seemed. The sun filtered through the kitchen window that morning, casting a warm glow on the familiar clutter that had built up in the corners of their shared home. Emily stood at the counter, her coffee brewing as the scent of rich dark roast enveloped the air, but her heart was far from settled. With the recent escalation of their rivalry, she had buried herself in deadlines at work, focusing on meeting her ambitious goals as an architect, yet a sense of unease lingered. The pressure to outshine her husband, to prove that she was better off alone, had taken its toll, clouding her judgment. When Jessica, her ever-supportive friend and attorney, had warned her that focusing solely on winning could backfire, Emily brushed it aside. Why should she care about anything but the challenge? Her phone buzzed unexpectedly, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a notification from Jason's freelance project manager, indicating a missed deadline by Jason that left him reeling in self-doubt. In the cluttered office of their shared home, Jason sat at his desk, surrounded by piles of memories that felt heavier than the books on his shelves. He had prided himself on managing his freelance work while also navigating the emotional chasm their marriage had created, but reality struck when he read the message. He could almost feel the weight of judgment on his shoulders as it triggered old insecurities about not being good enough. The decision to go solo felt filled with empty confidence as he thought back to Emily's pointed criticism, once saying that he was just a dreamer, always putting art before responsibility. Those words echoed in his mind, drowning his creativity in doubt. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building as he turned to check the kitchen. If she was working too hard to prove her independence, it wouldn't be long before he had to face her again, and the thought of their conversation seated in unresolved bitterness loomed over him. That evening, following a long day riddled with shortcomings, they sat across from each other in what felt like the remaining calm before an inevitable storm. A tentative silence settled between them, only to be interrupted by their own unacknowledged vulnerabilities. A flicker of courage sparked in Emily as she set down her papers and leaned back. She scrutinized Jason for a moment, searching for the man she once fell in love with beneath the layers of growing resentment. She cleared her throat, trying to gather her emotions. "Why did you miss the deadline?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended, laced with a hint of concern. Jason avoided her gaze, twisting his fingers together. He quickly turned defensive. "It's just freelance work. I can handle it. Not everything needs your precision, you know," he replied, the edge in his tone betraying the gravity of the situation. Emily rolled her eyes, her frustration bubbling up. "You have to face it, you always run away when things get tough," she remarked with a sharp inhale. Jason shot a glance at her, the hurt creeping into his voice as he snapped back. "Maybe if you didn't treat me like a responsibility to manage, I wouldn't have to." What felt like a simple query had spiraled into an argument, a reflection of their entire marriage crashing down upon them. In that heated exchange, memories flooded their minds, conversations filled with dreams of travel, laughter under starlit skies, and the promise of forever that now felt like a distant fantasy. As they argued, they stumbled upon truths both had avoided for months. The missed opportunities, the emotional distance, the unmet expectations that had been building bricks around them. For the first time, amidst the rising tempers and echoed regrets, they exchanged an understanding that went deeper than the superficial grievances they had accused each other of. Emily, acknowledging Jason's natural inclination towards creativity, said quietly that perhaps they had both pushed too hard against each other's strongest attributes. Likewise, Jason confessed that he could have been more involved, more grounded in their shared life rather than chasing fleeting dreams. Their converging pain painted a picture of two people who cherished their bond but had let the pressures of society's views redefine them. As reality set in and the conversation began to falter, Emily felt the vulnerability creeping in, the weight of unspoken apologies clinging to the air. They both knew their words hung unsaid, lingering like ghosts of their marriage. The heated exchange that had ignited their grievances suddenly fell silent. Both felt emotional exhaustion seep in, leaving an unsettling clarity that they were no longer only two individuals competing against each other, but a shared thread woven through dreams that once flourished. With the air thickening around them, no words remained to be spoken, the truth of their past woven into silence, revealing a heart-wrenching realization that neither of them truly wanted to let go. As the days blended into one another, an air of unspoken tension hung thickly in the house, suffocating the humor and lightness they'd once shared. Emily had been grappling with the notion of moving on, and Mark's casual charm had a way of luring her into what seemed like an enticing escape. One crisp Friday morning, she found herself standing in the boutique hotel lobby where Mark was waiting, his handsome smile radiating comfort and adventure. She was entranced by how he deftly managed the logistics, effortlessly arranging the details of their weekend escape, yet inside, a distant flicker of uncertainty lingered. It whispered to her that while it felt good to be swept away, the warmth of Mark's attention was not quite enough to fill the void Jason had left behind. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Emily, Jason was traversing his own path of supposed acceptance. He had agreed to collaborate closely with Rachel, who was more than eager to be by his side. Their work sessions had started promisingly, filled with laughter and light-hearted banter, but as the days wore on, Jason felt increasingly suffocated. Rachel's enthusiasm, once invigorating, transformed into a weight he couldn't shake. As he listened to her animated storytelling, he couldn't help but compare her relentless cheeriness to Emily's bite-sized humor that had always caught him off guard, leaving a bittersweet taste in his mouth. The spontaneity Jason once cherished in their marriage had been replaced by a scripted predictability that felt forced, a stark reminder of the genuine connection he had shared with Emily. As he endured another lengthy discussion about color palettes and childlike themes, he dimly recalled how vibrant and alive he'd felt when brainstorming with Emily, whose insights had always sparked an uncontainable joy. Even the simple act of sharing morning coffee had been a shared ritual that had become increasingly rare. As Emily and Mark explored the picturesque sights, a nagging emptiness curled within her. She smiled at Mark's jokes and allowed herself to revel in the beauty around them, yet every laugh felt like it was borrowed from a long-forgotten script. By the time sunset spilled its golden hues across the horizon, painting the sky with a brilliant nostalgia, she found herself staring into the deepening twilight, her heart yearning for the reckless spontaneity Jason had always brought into her life. It wasn't Mark's affection that felt lacking. It was the familiarity of Jason's embrace, the way he had given her the freedom to be herself without expectation or criticism. On the other side of town, as Jason sat with Rachel, observing her animated gestures as she recounted a story about her recent project, he felt as though he were an audience member watching a performance. He realized he was paying far too much attention to how her laughter didn't resonate as deeply as it used to with Emily, and he began to notice the mirrors of their interactions. He recalled Emily's laughter, how it would ripple through the air, igniting something alive within the rooms they had shared. The laughter that once punctuated the silence of their home was no longer present. Instead, it had been replaced by Rachel's enthusiastic encouragement that felt more like a cadence of politeness than genuine connection. Sitting across from Rachel, he felt trapped in the expectation that they should be enjoying their time together, but each smile was met with creeping doubt, and the emptiness within him echoed louder with each passing moment. By the time Sunday rolled around and they were both retreating back to their respective homes, a profound disturbance was waging war in their minds. Emily came home to a quiet house that felt even more barren than before, with the shadows of unfulfilled promises clinging to the walls, while Jason entered his space with a hesitating heart, grappling with the realization that this was not the freedom he had envisioned. They both found themselves sifting through their thoughts, questioning the very fabric of their desires. Could they truly move on, or were they simply evading the truth that their hearts still yearned for each other? Restlessness transformed into resolution within Emily as she pondered over Mark's attentiveness, ultimately discovering that it was not attention she craved, but the genuine intimacy she once shared with Jason that she could not replicate. Likewise, Jason felt an unfamiliar chill settling in as he replayed the weekend in his mind, realizing that random encounters could not replace the steady companionship he had lost. Both wished to emerge unscathed from the competition, but deep down, their hearts had slowly begun to reconcile that the choice was never really about winning or losing but rather about confronting the love that still lingered stubbornly in the air around them. One particularly grueling evening, after what felt like endless meetings and a barrage of emails that left her mentally drained, Emily sank into the living room's dim light, her heart succumbing to a heaviness she had fought to ignore. The silence wrapped around her like a fog, amplifying her sorrows, and as the tears threatened to spill down her cheeks, she found comfort in the shadows, feeling utterly alone despite the very house they once shared. Meanwhile, Jason, returning home from a late night of writing, paused at the doorway, his heart skimming a beat at the sight of her, his heartache materializing into something visceral. He felt the urge to retreat, to preserve the walls they had so carefully built up, but the sight of Emily alone, vulnerable, and illuminated only by the streetlight filtering through the window drove him forward. He hesitated but felt a compulsion to reach out, a silent plea inside him that begged to bridge the chasm that had widened between them. Sliding down beside her on the couch, he chose to forego words, sensing that they might only cheapen the gravity of the moment. With an unspoken understanding, he remained close, his presence infusing the heavy air with an anchor of shared history, and in that darkness, their silence began to weave a thread of intimacy, a fragile connection that spoke of their past while simultaneously acknowledging their present grief. The tension that usually thrummed between them softened into a quiet acknowledgement of pain, and without the need for dialogue, they found a moment's peace, one that echoed the familiarity of their earlier years, transforming the dim gloom into a sanctuary where unspoken feelings could briefly intermingle. The following morning broke with a crispness that felt different, like the air was infused with a sense of renewal. Jason noticed the way the soft sunlight fell across the living room floor, casting gentle patterns that beckoned him to approach the day with intention. There was a strange clarity in his mind where worry had once thrived. In those brief moments with Emily the night before, he had reconsidered his battle-ready stance against her. Reflecting on their history, he recognized that it had been much too easy to let resentment and frustration overshadow what had once been a deep-seated love, a love that deserved to be appreciated, even if it seemed eclipsed by differences. As he picked up the clutter that had overtaken their shared spaces, he felt an unexpected sense of purpose infusing his movements, almost as if Emily's silent vulnerability had instilled in him a desire to show care rather than compete. Meanwhile, in her sunlit kitchen, Emily found herself reflecting on her own reactions to the chaos of their separation. She brewed a pot of coffee, her hands absent-mindedly tracing the curves of the ceramic mug, Jason's favorite coffee mug. A renewed sense of empathy arose within her. Memories suffused the air around her, and she couldn't help but remember how his laughter had once warmed her heart even on the coldest of nights. As she layered on the cream and sugar, a soft smile crossed her lips. She had begun to notice how Jason's more organized approach to household tasks was undeniably charming. It surprised her how the little things he had done, whether repairing the leaky sink or organizing the bookshelf, sparked tenderness in her heart that she hadn't realized was still there, waiting in the wings. As they crossed paths that morning, their eyes met with an understanding that spoke volumes. The competitive edges they had sharpened now dulled in the sunlight that filled the room. He said that he appreciated the way she had taken care of their shared home, and for the first time, Emily responded by saying that he could keep it up. She smiled, a genuine touch of warmth blooming between them in the kitchen. It was as if the rivalry had begun to dissolve, with the hardness of their separate lives intertwining in new, softer patterns. Each moment spent together carried the weight of unspoken words about their love, their failures, and the hope they still harbored, however buried it had become. Their competitive spirits ebbed, replaced by collaboration as their eyes sparkled with memories of laughter and love that once defined their relationship. Those moments transformed the atmosphere, bringing an inexplicable comfort. They started seeking moments together rather than apart, and awkward closeness rearranged their separate social circles, and seemingly trivial habits resurfaced as comforting routines. Beneath the mundane, they buried the pulse of potential reconciliation, teetering on the edge of rediscovery, their hearts reluctant yet eager to explore the quiet intimacy rising from the depths of their past, the kind that had always promised warmth but had been smothered by expectations. The path ahead was uncharted, but the echo of laughter and the soft nudge of unexpected compassion lingered between them, blurring the once clear lines of competition and inviting a hesitant glimpse of hope into the possibility of reconnecting. As the end of the 6-month challenge loomed on the horizon, the atmosphere in the house had shifted palpably for both Emily and Jason, almost tangibly charged with unspoken words and unanswered questions. The once fervent competition had dimmed, like the fading glow of a candle. What had begun as a fierce battle of independence had gradually transformed into an introspective journey where both felt the weight of their choices pressing down upon them. Late one evening, while they both occupied different rooms within the same house, Emily found herself staring blankly at her work desk, the architectural plans before her blurring into abstract lines as her thoughts tangled around Jason. The coffee she had prepared that morning still sat half-drunk beside her computer, the cup now cold, a silent testament not only to her distraction but to the comfort she used to find in his presence, a simple warmth that had started to seep back into their lives through shared meals and late-night conversations. When Jason strolled through the kitchen, his laughter carrying over her contemplative silence, Emily's heart skipped as she recognized the sound that, once upon a time, had a home in her very core. She recalled the late-night discussions, where they would spiral into laughter until their stomachs hurt, and the playful jabs they'd throw at each other while building their dreams, leaving her to grapple with the unwelcome sense of nostalgia. During a heart-to-heart with Jessica, Emily's best friend and confidant, she felt an unsettling pull in her chest as Jessica pushed her to establish what she truly desired for her future. With emphasis on the importance of knowing one's own heart, Jessica leaned in and asked directly, "Are you ready to let go of the life you imagined with him?" Emily met Jessica's gaze, the flicker of doubt reflected in her eyes as she responded, questioning herself. She realized that amidst the attempts to showcase her independence, she had neglected to examine whether she truly desired a life apart. Moments of clarity began to invade her thoughts. She found herself reminiscing about how Jason used to make her coffee every morning just the way she liked it, and it dawned on her that she might have been distracting herself with work, not realizing how much she missed the little things which were intricately woven into the fabric of her days. Meanwhile, Jason was dealing with his own set of realizations, seemingly separate from but intrinsically linked to Emily. After a long, unfulfilling day at work, he grabbed the phone and called Ryan, his older brother, who had often been critical and skeptical of his choices. Ryan's voice came through the line, urging Jason to move on and seize opportunities that lay ahead, pushing him to assert his independence as if it was the only path worth following. Yet, with every assertion of freedom, Jason felt an unsettling sense of emptiness creep in. The thought of Rachel, the charming illustrator who had been making advances toward him, felt forced and hollow without Emily's unpredictable spark to ignite them. At night, as he lay on the living room couch, the ticking clock echoed ominously in the silence, whispering to him questions he had been actively avoiding, and he stirred uncomfortably, contemplating what he truly wanted. Did he even want to pursue a life apart anymore, or was he merely prolonging the inevitable? That evening, both Emily and Jason found themselves in the backyard, the smell of freshly blooming jasmine wafting through the air, reminding them of the times they had shared long evenings under the stars, discussing everything from the mundane to their greatest fears and dreams. The tension was palpable as they sat across from one another, the dim light of the garden fairy lights casting flickering shadows, betraying the intricate layers of their emotions. Neither spoke at first, the silence filled with echoes of their past, a weight heavier than any words could convey. Jason finally broke the stillness, his voice steady but introspective as he said that he had been thinking about their relationship, and without realizing it, he had been letting the thoughts of life after divorce consume him. He admitted that the joy he had anticipated in being freed from their marriage felt duller than he had imagined. Emily felt a sharp tug at her heart, a resonance in his words that spoke of buried hope, and she reflected this back to him, admitting that, for her, the prospect of a life without him was ever so slowly morphing into a haunting fear of isolation. Both of them recognized the underlying truth that had evaded them throughout the challenge. The yearning they had to prove their happiness apart had dimmed in the presence of their past feelings, a realization rapidly approaching the surface. As they exchanged glances filled with vulnerability, the question hung heavily in the air, unavoidably entangled in the breaths between them. Did they genuinely want a divorce, or were they both simply afraid to confront their failing marriage? In this shared moment of clarity intertwined with unease, they silently agreed that a resolution was necessary, marking the beginning of a transformative path where their next steps would no longer be dictated by competition but by a deeper understanding of what they truly needed. On the final day of their 6-month challenge, Emily and Jason sat across from each other at their kitchen table, the remnants of their former life filling the space around them with memories that echoed like whispers. Sunlight filtered through the half-drawn curtains, casting soft shadows that danced on the surface of the divorce papers laid out between them, stark and impersonal. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplifying the weight of the moment as neither of them moved to sign the documents that would sever the last ties binding them together. Jason finally inhaled deeply, his heart racing with the vulnerability of his next words, and he admitted that he no longer cared about the house. What truly mattered to him was understanding if Emily was genuinely happier without his presence in her life. Emily felt as if the walls had briefly caved in, the familiar ache of their shared history flaring to life in her chest. She hesitated, the carefully constructed walls around her emotions wavering for the first time, and then she finally let down her guard, revealing a truth that had been buried beneath layers of resentment and disappointment. She confessed that she wasn't happier, the honesty spilling from her lips as if it had been waiting in the shadows, clawing to break free. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. The truth wrapped around them like a warm blanket, momentarily dispelling the chill of their separation. The silence that followed was charged with a new energy, the past mingling with the present as they both recognized that this was not merely a game to win or lose but a testament to the love they had once shared. Emily's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, a mix of relief and sorrow as she confronted the possibility that maybe they had gotten lost somewhere along the way, blinded by ambition and the weight of unmet expectations. Jason leaned forward, the realization dawning upon him that it wasn't just about the competition, but about the life they had envisioned together, the laughter, the late-night conversations, and the quiet moments on the couch that had once filled their home with warmth. He began to understand that perhaps he had been as responsible for their distance as she had been. In that moment, their fierce rivalry began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of shared vulnerability that neither had expected. The subtle shifts in their body language, Emily's shoulders relaxing and Jason's gaze softening, spoke of a yearning to reconnect, to peel back the layers that had shielded their hearts for so long. They were no longer two opponents trying to outscore each other. They were two people seeking clarity in the midst of chaos, grappling with the remnants of what love felt like when it was alive and breathing. Neither of them knew what the future held, but as they looked into each other's eyes, a mutual understanding blossomed. They were both scared, both searching for answers, and, most importantly, both still holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for in their marriage. As hope flickered between them, its light illuminating their path forward, Emily felt a sense of liberation wash over her, and for the first time in a long while, she dared to believe in the possibilities that lay ahead. As the soft glow of the evening sun bathed their living room in warmth, Jason and Emily raised their glasses, the clinking sound echoing like the promise of a fresh start. "To new beginnings," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face while Emily's heart fluttered, a familiar warmth coursing through her. They both felt the gravity of this moment, the intensity of emotions left unsaid winding tightly around them. This was more than just a toast. It was a shared pledge to rediscover the essence of what had once brought them together. As laughter danced between them, Jason leaned in slightly. "So, are we really going to let Jessica think I lost?" he teased, mischief lighting up his eyes, which made Emily smile even wider. They both understood this new chapter would require work, commitment, and perhaps even a bit of patience, but the laughter, the way their eyes sparkled with unspoken affection, suggested they were no longer just contestants. They were companions on a thrilling journey. Just as Emily was about to respond, a ring of the doorbell interrupted them. They exchanged glances, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. Could this be yet another twist in their evolving story? As Jason opened the door, they both felt a tingle of anticipation, the air thick with possibility. Standing at the entrance was Mark, a bit out of breath, a hopeful smile stretched across his face. "Emily, I've been thinking," he started, but it wasn't just his words that hung in the air. It was the tension of what could follow, a ripple of uncertainty that could either strengthen their rekindled bond or challenge it anew. With hearts racing, they turned to each other, knowing this moment would define their new beginning, not just with each other but with the world beyond their doors. In that suspended breath before the future unfolded, Emily felt a mix of excitement and anxiety, realizing that while old chapters had closed, the story was far from over. This was just the prologue of an enthralling adventure, fraught with unpredictability but rich with love's promise, and somehow, through it all, they knew they would navigate every twist and turn together. The real competition had just begun, but this time, victory tasted sweet, the kind that only comes with embracing life's uncertainties hand in hand. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.